Welcome to episode 23 of Basics and Beyond, the podcast. Today, I am so excited to bring to you the conversation that Justin Nault and I had. We talked about so many topics, but the base of our conversation really was around mindset and loving yourself in order to make those changes, those sustainable lifestyle changes that you want to make happen and stick. This is a really great podcast. So much to get into here. I welcome you to the next hour of time with Justin Nault. Welcome you to the show. Thanks for coming on. Love having you here. So glad that you reached out because it gave me an opportunity to jump into your socials and see what you were all about. And man, you do some fun stuff. So Justin, why don't you tell the people who listen to me a little bit more about you?
Yeah, so I really consider myself more than anything an architect of freedom is the way that I like to say it because there are certifications and like I'm a certified nutritional therapist. I'm a specialist in sports nutrition, a specialist in fitness nutrition. I've done work with everyone from professional athletes to what is 85% of my clientele now are really people that have been overweight and dealing with chronic health conditions for sometimes decades. I really kind of say it like people come to me when everything else has failed, right? And they're just kind of at their wits' end and they're like, I'm looking for something different. That's when people come to me. We're usually dealing with significant obesity, a lot of autoimmune conditions, or people that have just been, diagnosed pre-diabetic or something like that, and they're freaking out. They're like, okay, like I've reached the end of the road. Like I need to do something different. So I focus on a concept that I call how to lose weight by eating more and exercising less.
I say that all the time to people.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. Part of my background is eating less and doing more.
Okay.
I did that for decades and
Mhm.
decades. I was diagnosed. Well, I wasn't diagnosed. I was an anorexic and bulimic from about the age of 18.
Wow.
Didn't get therapy until 39.
Mhm.
So I was definitely on board with whatever the people were talking about when it came to don't eat this, that, or the other, and do all the exercise. And so I learned and
Yeah.
learned what actually works. And what actually works is exactly what you're saying. Eat more, do less. Yeah. Sorry.
100%.
I think that's fantastic. Go ahead.
No, I mean, if you think about it fundamentally, right? Like I always judge health and wellness through the basics. And it's interesting because I don't think enough people talk about this now. And I said this, I was speaking at an event in Orlando and I said this on stage. And it's like you could hear a pin drop. And I'm like, have people really not thought about this? Like I judge human health based on the organism's ability to reproduce, which
Mm,
is like the basic biological function, right? And we can talk about perimenopause and menopause and those transitional periods, but even those, the way that you go through those transitions and the severity of symptoms that you experience is going to be based on how fertile you were before those transitional periods, right?
yes.
It's like, can the human organism do what it is literally designed to do, which is reproduce? And the best way to make that happen is to have the organism, the body, be as the least amount of stress possible. The less
Yes.
stressed the organism is, the more likely it can reproduce. But
Yes.
everything that we hear in all of health and wellness, and now what we were talking about before we started to record, what we hear in alternative health and wellness as well, is just stress, 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 stress. Every single stress that we're told to do is somehow hormetic, this idea of like hormesis, right? And it's just like people are just destroying their nervous systems, destroying their thyroid function, following all this advice that is layering stress upon stress upon stress upon stress. And early on in my career, I was doing weight cuts for female UFC fighters.
Mm,
And I prided myself in the fact that my fighters did not get amenorrhea, where nearly every single female fighter that does some kind of drastic weight cut before a fight, they have amenorrhea,
right.
right? Because the body is so incredibly stressed.
Yes.
So I've really just spent the last 10 plus years of my career in helping people figure out how we can get the body composition changes that we want to see in the least stressful way possible so that things like amenorrhea don't happen. And that's what I've just been, incredibly frustrated with, especially even the field of functional medicine today. It's just like everybody is like run of the mill, do intermittent fasting or do one meal a day and restrict your carbohydrates or go keto and also do cold plunges and also do heavy lifting and also do cardio sessions and also get 10,000 steps a day and blah, 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 blah. It's madness. It's like,
Yeah.
it's fundamentally broken. And some of those things may work or they may have worked better in previous decades because people are not taking into consideration. Like I have I have an overhead light right now. I have a ring light on me. I have blue lights in my face. I have EMF all around me. I just
Yeah.
got out of a 5 minute cold plunge actually, so I'm still shivering a little bit. But it's just like there's so much stress happening. Like humans are more stressed psychologically and physiologically than ever before in history.
Mhm.
And then when they say, "Oh, I don't feel well," or "I have low energy," we have them do things that are more stressful.
It's interesting that you bring that up, and I love this topic because this is really at the heart of what we do, right?
Mhm.
I'm a functional health coach. I base what I do off of nutrition, right? I mean, because that's a great basis, right? But I talk to people about stress, and I don't know if you do this, but I have to change that word for a lot of people because I think in this day and age, it is so overused. And when I ask someone, are you stressed? Or we have the stress conversation, I've had people come back at me like, stop asking me that question. I'm not stressed out. And I'm like, you're talking 300 miles an hour. I know you're
Yeah.
stressed out. Right. So I changed the word because it's a turnoff for them. They just automatically turn away from it because we have kind of disconnected ourselves from what it actually is. And what you're talking about is stress on the body is the fact that we're not giving it enough energy for the energy we're asking it to put out into the world. And it's so funny because people ask me things like, is it so calories in and calories out? And I'm like, da-da-da. It's energy in and energy out. So
Mhm.
what are all your energy inputs and what are all your energy outputs? And that speaks directly to what you're talking about in this day and age. Like we're not on the savannah running from a cheetah,
Right.
trying not to be dinner or trying to
Right.
find our dinner. We are bombarded, like you said, with all of these psychological things, and our physical world, we don't have a lot of stress physically, most of us.
Mhm.
So we're kind of looking at the wrong things most of the time, or like you said, tacking on looking at all the things at one time, which causes just as much stress.
Exactly. Yeah. Can I ask, how do you reword? What's the word that you use instead of stress?
It was interesting. The reason that I started doing that is because, of course, I have my own coach and I have for a long time. And I've moved coaches a couple of times, but one coach in particular I was working with, he asked me that all the time. And I felt myself push back on him every time he asked that question.
Mm,
Then I thought about it and thought about it. And I thought, oh, I feel stressed when I feel overwhelmed. That's my word.
right.
If
Right.
I'm overwhelmed, then I know I'm stressed. I've had people say, "Oh, it's when I feel really pressured to do everything." I'm like, "Okay, that's your word." And so because I had to do some soul searching myself, which is probably why you do some of the things that you do, right?
Mhm.
Um, I figured out that there are people who get the stress word and it's not a big deal, but it's overwhelm, pressure to do too many things. Those are usually some of the words that people use.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. A term that I use, excuse me, that comes from kind of I guess the field you would call it, or the topic of bioenergetics and basically how your cells create energy is the low energy state. So
Hmm.
it's very rare that I have somebody come to me looking for help that is not experiencing symptoms of incredibly low energy. And that's an important thing to pay attention to because of what you talked about. We're taught calories in, calories out, or we're taught energy balance as energy in, energy out. But if you think about it, right, if you have a car that has a full tank of gasoline and the
Hmm.
car is just off and it's sitting there, that car has no energy. It has a lot of potential energy.
True.
It has a full tank of potential energy.
Mm-hmm.
Potential energy is not energy until a catalyst turns it into energy, which is the
Mm-hmm.
same way we measure calories. We burn things and they have a caloric output, right? So if you think about a car that has like gunked up spark plugs, it could have a full tank of gas and it's not going to function or create the amount of energy that it could if it had brand new clean spark plugs.
Sure.
That's really where I come in, where I'm looking at what's happening at the level of the mitochondria.
Mhm.
And why is it that when we have people who are clinically obese, no matter how much food they eat or what food they eat or whatever, they're dealing with incredibly low energy symptoms. So we know there's issues inside the machine itself where
Yes.
the
The
efficiency
system
of
as a whole.
energy creation. The what?
The system. There's something wrong in the system.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
the energy being created, the energy production system is incredibly inefficient and
Hmm.
has things that need to be fixed or corrected. So this is why people come to me and you as well, I'm sure, they're like, I'm cold all the time. My hair is thinning. I'm losing more hair in the shower. I have no libido and it's impacting my relationships. I'm depressed. I'm anxious. I'm snapping at my kids, whatever it is. These
Hmm.
are all symptoms of a low energy. And the only answer from all the health and wellness spheres is calorie restriction, intermittent fasting, low carbohydrate,
Makes
more
zero
workout.
sense, right?
0 cents. Zero.
Yeah. 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 So when you have someone that comes to you in that state, um, what kind of questions do you ask them? What do you do? How do you start that process for them to understand? I do you sit them down and say, I understand where you're coming from, makes sense, right? This is what you've been told, but we're going to change that for you. How do you do that?
Yeah, totally. I mean, the first thing is we want to get clarity on what's actually going on, right? Because you'll hear people will say, like, I've tried everything, right? Then I want to get an understanding of what they mean when they say I've tried everything. So we have to kind of go through their history of what they've done. And this is where I was saying earlier with like mainstream health and wellness plus alternative health and wellness now, really all that they're doing is restriction with a
Mhm.
different fancy name.
Oh, yes.
There's, the keto people where it's like I'm restricting total calories. The
Mhm.
carnivore people, I'm restricting everything that's not meat. The vegan people, I'm restricting everything that's not plants. You know what I mean? It's like you're restricting something always, or even intermittent fasting, like we talked about.
Yeah.
It's this constant game of restricting. How much can you restrict? Because restriction leads to better health somehow, which I don't believe.
Mhm.
And so we start there, and I just kind of help them see. All I'm trying to do early on with clients is give them light bulb moments where
Mhm.
they realize, okay, this actually isn't as complex and confusing, and I'm not as fundamentally broken as I think that I am, because everyone comes to me with the same issues, but they feel like it's unique to them
Mhm.
because social media is showing them all these before and after pictures of everyone who's done so well, and every diet has a zillion testimonies, and their friend from down the street is now a size 0 when they used to be a size 12. So they're comparing themselves to all these other things, and they're believing the issue is with them and that they're uniquely broken. So what I'm trying to do in the beginning is just shed light on the fact that they've been misled, and all of this complex confusion can be simplified very quickly.
Yeah. Do you that brings up a really interesting point. What when they come to you, like
Mhm.
you talked about all the different restrictions, that sounds very negative, right?
Mhm.
There's a lot of negativity around that. There's a lot of I'm not doing things right. Like especially when they're like, like you said, I must be different than everyone else. Something is specially wrong with me because everyone else is finding the success and all these things. And then you throw all of that restriction on it. I feel like there's just this entire negative connotation to I, as a human, am not doing the right things. Therefore, I am not right. Do
Mhm.
you dig in? Do you find that with people like their value becomes lessened because of the entire sphere of all that, and their self-love is very diminished at that point? Do you find that?
100%. I love that you brought this up. And I'm laughing because you're like, I say the how to lose weight by eating more and exercising less. Like we have so many synchronicities here. Every single person who ever enters into one of my programs gets a daily non-negotiable called daily mirror work.
Mm-hmm.
Daily mirror work is you are going to stand in front of a mirror, you're going to look yourself in the eyes, and you're going to say, I love you out loud 10 times. And you're going to try your very best to mean it. And I don't care if in the beginning it's fake it till you make it. You're going to do it every single day for the next 90 days, right? And of all the things I do in all of my programs, this is the one that I get the most pushback on. This is the one that I get the least amount of participation in. Some women try it the first time they do it, they start crying. Some men refuse to try it until day 60. I'm like, listen, I'm gonna kick you out of the program. You gotta do daily, you gotta try this, right? Or you have people that are like, I started doing the daily mirror work and I was kind of got a lump in my throat and my face got red. I'm like, think about this. You are alone in a room. There is no one there for you to be embarrassed in front of except yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe, now this may be considered a controversial thought by some, but I think one of the primary reasons for the obesity epidemic today, if we just remove food, diet, exercise, that whole piece of it, one of the primary reasons for the obesity epidemic today is people are living lives that are not in alignment with who they want to be. And until we can fix that, it's going to be very, very difficult for those people to achieve optimal health and wellness. We can get the macros right. We can get the types of food right. We can get sun exposure right. We can get the fitness routine right. if you are spending, let's say, 40 to 60 hours a week at a job that you hate where people don't respect you and don't treat you well, or you're commuting 2 hours one way in traffic and you're stressed out every day, or you're in an emotionally abusive relationship or something like that, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to achieve optimal health and wellness. I would argue near impossible.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Oh, well, it goes to the conversation around there is no way, I'm not even gonna ask the question. There's no way to disconnect our physiology from our psychology, from our mental health, right? Everything, it's just one whole system that works together. It's interesting that you bring it up that way because do you think that most people know consciously, not subconsciously, but consciously, that they're not living in alignment?
No. No, and the reason for that, I think, is because they were specifically programmed to not realize it. And this
Oh,
is where we get
talk more
into,
about that. Talk more about that.
I mean, think about it, right? Most people who work with you, the vast majority of people who work with you, the vast majority of people who work with me, came up in a public school system. A public school system teaches you that there is an authority that knows better than you, always. Not only does that authority know better, they have dominion over you. If you are a child and you raise your hand because you have to go pee, there is a dictator in the front of the room who can say, figure it out, hold it, you can't go right now. And
Mhm.
you have to sit there. And if you go, okay, actually, teach, I'm not going to do that because I have to pee, so I'm going to go pee right now. And you walk out of the room, they'll go lock you in a different room. They'll put you in detention, right? You're taught what to think. You're taught what to believe. You're taught how to take tests. You're taught how to do calculations, everything. So what ends up happening is you end up with these full-grown adults that have gone down the hallway that they were put into. It's like, listen, this is what you do. This is your 12 years of schooling. Then you have to go to higher education. You have to take out student loans. You have to do the thing. You have to find a career. By the way, once you're in that career, even if you hate it, you just got to grin and bear it for the next 35 years. And then maybe you'll have a 401k and enough money to retire and blah, blah, blah. Right. So people end up put in these cages and they don't realize that, like, yes, they were guided there. They were programmed to be there. But now you're standing in a cage, you have the key in your hand, and you're just choosing not to open it and walk out. Because opening it and walking out puts you in with a target on your back where you are now different.
Mhm.
People will judge you. People will have opinions. People will say you didn't do it right. You didn't do it according to everybody else. Society fundamentally runs on this of people wanting to fit the mold of what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, and I think too, it's not just so I come from education.
Hmm.
I was an educator for a long time in public school, and you are right. There are that that system. That's how that system was created, right? Because of the amount of students and whatever. And I'm not here to like defend it in any way, shape, or form. I will say it is changing, and it has been changed. There's a lot of people trying to change that because that is not what the system should be. And there's
Hmm.
a lot of people who know that, right? We should be helping these young people. Yes, there's that bit of knowledge. We have to give them knowledge. We have to do those kinds of things. But I always talked about we have to discover the knowledge together. Like, because the purpose of education, in my opinion, and a lot of educators is to help them learn to problem solve,
Hmm.
discover things, like do all of those things. Because when you get out in the world, I've always said this, like no one's going to ask you to, recite, oh God, the beginning of William Shakespeare, right? Like Romeo and
Right.
Juliet. No one's going to
Right.
ask you to do that. Why would
No.
we have you do that? No one cares. Especially nowadays, there's the internet. No one cares. But we
Mhm.
have to teach them to think critically, connect with themselves, look at what they're looking at with a critical eye, and do some problem solving things, right? Also, though, I think not only education tends to do that and has done a really good job of not doing that for people, about putting them in a box and being like, sit down, shut up, and just do what I tell you.
Right.
I think we find that a lot at homes too, where both parents are working, both parents are just like, you see that this is how life is. You go to work, you come home, you sit and watch TV, or you whatever, get on social media or whatever the heck. Don't bother the parents. They're doing their thing. You do your thing. Everybody just fits into this little thing. And it's that's one of the things that I talk to my clients a lot about. And when I go talk, because I go speak at schools to
Mhm.
teachers and staff, is the biggest thing that we need to do is to reconnect with ourselves because we've
Yeah.
been taught to disconnect. Just do the damn thing that
Right.
someone told you to do, like you're talking about. It's like you're taught to just do the damn thing. And And that disconnect, I think, is probably, and I know it is the thing that keeps us from being healthy
Yeah, of
because we
course.
can't get in there to figure it out.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, one of my favorite books, actually, you would love this book if you've not read it because it's by, I think he was in Chicago, but a 30 plus year school teacher in the public education system. And he went on after his retirement to write this book called Weapons of Mass Instruction.
Mm.
It is unbelievable. And
Mm.
it's so eye-opening. And it's understanding that like this system that was built, and this happens a lot in the US, right? Like mainstream medicine is this way, where the system just gets too big. And then the system can't move on a dime. Like the public education system cannot change overnight. It's impossible. That can't happen.
No.
It's too like cemented in its ways. And at the time, when it first came about, it was literally designed to have children do the same jobs that their parents were doing, but do them better
Sure.
and do it with less complaining and more easier to control, right? So it
Right.
kind of keeps, if you go back to founding fathers or whatever, he had like 12-year-old boys that were like fighting in wars and like captaining ships and stuff, right? So like public education kind of keeps human beings in this sort of infant like state where they're like constantly looking for somebody to tell them to do, and here's the curriculum and here's how you follow it, here's exactly what to do. And this follows, and you actually see it now, however you feel about social things that are happening or whatever, but like at higher levels of academia, we have these things happening where there's people that have not actually been out in the world and done problem solving. It's like their entire life was this curriculum based thing.
Yeah.
And they get very confused when they get smacked in the face by middle America and how they see things. And they see it different than the coastal regions and all this stuff. It's like very confusing because
Yes.
they're in this bubble, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So I
And
think it's,
you
yeah,
have to actively get outside your bubble. And
exactly.
we don't teach people to do that. And you can see that. I'm sure you see that with the clients that come to you. I see it with clients that come to me, is they have this very definite, I'm coming to you to change things and do things differently because what I've been doing isn't working. And then you kind of enter that space of discomfort where things aren't, we're going to do things. I'm going to say things that are like going to blow your mind because it's totally different than what you've been told. And there's the pushback. And it's like, wait a minute, I really came to you to tell me what I wanted to hear, that I could
Exactly.
still keep doing what I was doing because I'm kind of tunnel visioned that way, right?
Yeah.
Um, and we and to be able to kind of peel that back from everything they've learned in their whole life and go, wait, that's not right. Think about it. Let's think about
Yeah.
it. And then turn inward, reconnect and say, how are you thinking about things? And how is your body responding?
Hmm.
Right. So most of my work with my clients is just saying, hey, okay, so how did your body respond to that? Oh, well, this, that, and the other. Great. So this is why it responded that way. This
Hmm.
is great. Let's continue down that road. And they always want it faster than, but that's a different topic.
Sure, sure.
But yeah, it makes sense when you think about it that way, that we've just been trained to do what we're told.
Yeah.
And like you talked about earlier, and we talked about before we jumped on, we have the Western medicine on one side and we have functional health or whatever, that alternative medicine on the other side. Which is right? Is
Yeah.
there right? I think it depends on the person,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, the idea of n equals one, really. This is why I say like architect of freedom, right? It's like in no, this is just the way that I live my life. Not everybody has to do this, but like in no area of my life is somebody fundamentally in control other than me. Like the amount of money that I can make is not capped because I own several businesses and I just do what I want to do, right? It's like so everything. It's just like there's really nothing in my life where somebody is in full control. There I have to obey laws and things like that. You know what I mean? But I'm trying to encourage people to take back their own inner authority. That's what it is. Like their entire life, they didn't have an internal authority. They've only
Yeah.
had external authorities.
Yeah.
And that's what we're battling against. And this is where you see things like the craziness that happened in 2020 and all this stuff, where it's like everyone is looking for this outer authority to tell them what to do and hoping that that will somehow make them happy. I'm here to tell them that the only way to true happiness is to find your own inner authority and live only by that, no matter what anybody else thinks about it.
And that is so difficult. Think about it. When so many people are like, just tell me what to do. Just like what time, even if you're saying, okay, so when like I equate this with people all the time, is like when you go to work, you do exactly what you're told. Yeah.
Mhm.
Is it hard sometimes? Yeah. Do you do it anyway? Yeah. Okay. So take that because you're so good at that already. Look at all the skills you've built Now
Hmm.
turn it toward yourself, and you get to be, like you're saying, the architect
Hmm.
of how you're going to live your life. What are you going to eat? What are you going to drink? How are you going to move? How are you going to sleep? What's that going to look like? Like, you do have control over those things because you've shown in other areas of your life that you do have control, and they don't
Yeah.
see it that way.
Right.
It's well, and maybe they do see it that way, but it's like you said, it's so much easier to just give control over to someone else.
Hmm.
And then it becomes not my responsibility. And if something bad happens, well, I didn't do it. I was told to do it.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. I say this with coaches, right? It's like there's a lot of coaches out in the world, and it's quite simple, right? Like if we look at the protocol and we say like the feeling trumps the protocol. Always. The
Mm,
feeling trumps the protocol, right? So if somebody comes to me, I'm like, "Hey, you give me 30 days. If you do not feel exponentially better, just walk away. I'll give you your money back. There's a money back guarantee, and you can walk away.
mhm.
But don't like suffer through this thing if it's not working for you. And that's fundamentally, it's like you said, people want the results very, very quickly. They want to undo 30 years of poisoning their body, and they want to undo it in 3 weeks,
Mm,
right? So I have to shift that, and all my programs were shifting the mindset. And I'm telling them, listen, I care a little bit about the next 5 weeks for you, but I care much more about the next 5 years and
yes.
helping people see if we can shift that mindset. Because what other people do besides that, I've tried everything and nothing works. Then I ask them, kind of a Jedi mind trick. I'm like, what worked for you? What has worked for you in the past? And they tell me all these things that worked. Once upon a time, 6 years ago, I did keto and I lost 15 pounds and it was amazing.
And it
And
worked.
and it worked,
And
right?
it worked.
And,
Yeah.
and my follow-up question is interesting. It worked so well that you had to stop following it. And you're met with a blank stare. And it's like, listen, no, that didn't work. If you couldn't fundamentally make the identity shift into being that person and
Mhm.
then living that way so that you have continued success until the day that you die, that program didn't work
Right.
because that's all we're doing. And this is why I have all these personal development exercises like writing letters back and forth with your future self. What is your future self doing? The healthiest version of you? What did their daily habits look like? Because
Mhm.
if we can take those daily habits from the future healthiest version of you and adopt them today and tomorrow and the day after consistently, you kind of bend space and time and you bring that 3 year version of yourself into you in this present moment. And
Mhm.
you can do that with any goal. You can do it with making more money. You can do it with a better romantic relationship, calling in a partner. You can do it with health and wellness, anything. But you
Sure.
just have to understand that what you're doing right now is what got you to the present moment that you're in. So if you're not willing to change the daily actions that you're taking, there's really no reason for you to be in a program or working with a coach if you're not going to do that.
Mm. Yeah, that mindset shift is really the key, right? It's really difficult, and it's really the key into making any great change in life. And I love that you mentioned that. It's like, oh no, but all these things worked. It's like
Yeah.
for a very short time.
Hmm.
And I say that to people like, okay, if you only want to lose 10 pounds,
Hmm.
okay, like I can make you lose 10 pounds. If you want to lose 30 pounds, we can make you lose 30 pounds. We can do that. We can do that. Give me a month, give me 2 months, whatever your time frame is. I have a gentleman who I work with right now. He has goals for June, and we're like 5 weeks into this. And he's like, I thought this would be different. I thought there would be, I can't remember the word he used, but he's like, I thought this would be more comfortable by now, that this would be whatever. And I'm like,
Mm.
yeah, we're 5 weeks in. You've already lost 2 inches,
Yeah.
but the scale
Right.
hasn't changed, right? I don't care.
Yep.
I don't care about the scale, right?
Me
I
neither.
I love that I can see in your pictures that your inflammation has gone down. I can
Hmm.
your clothes. The first thing he said to me was, I'm going to the bathroom every day and my clothes are fitting better and I'm sleeping better. And that was 2 weeks in. I'm like, we are winning. Like,
Exactly.
and it's that mindset shift around and this coming from an anorexic bulimic, you know, taking the scale out of the equation, because that number doesn't mean anything. It doesn't have, it's not who you are. It's not your value. It's not how much you're worth. It's not how much you deserve love. It's not a goal,
Hmm.
because muscle and fat weigh the same. I'd rather have more muscle, right? Because it's
Totally.
metabolic and it's healthy, and right. So what you talked about in terms of what worked before is didn't obviously work, because
Yeah.
it didn't change your mindset. It didn't shift who you are as a person for your life, which is the most
No.
important thing.
Yeah, of course. And then when we look at data, or we look at like the Biggest Loser study, or there's
Oh, yeah.
data that says that 95% of people who lose the weight gain it all back within 5 years, right? So when you look at it, it's even to call something successful and say like it worked for a little while. It's I have a podcast from years ago titled "How Weight Loss Ruined Everything," and
Oh,
it's like, and I talk about, like if someone calls me up and they say, "Hey, I'm 6'5" and I'm 280 pounds and I need your help." Well, I have no idea if that person is morbidly obese or if I'm talking to The Rock,
yeah,
right?
right?
There will be two very different humans. I don't know their body composition. I don't know anything about them, right? This
Yep.
idea that weight loss at any cost is healthy,
Mm,
right? So for someone to say, well, this thing worked for me years back, keto worked for me, I know instantly all they mean is they lost a few pounds.
yes.
And in their mind, the only marker of health and wellness is, am I fat or am I skinny? That's it. Nothing in between. They don't know anything about metabolism,
Mm-hmm.
blood work, any of this stuff, right? So as long as they lost a few pounds, in their mind, it worked. But not only did it work, it must have been healthy for them.
Sure.
And I try to help them connect the dot, right? And metabolic adaptation and the way these things bounce back and you
Mm,
decrease your thyroid function, all these things, weight regain, right? They're not thinking about those things. They're just, did I lose weight or did I not? To the
mm,
point where this client who you've gotten amazing results in, this guy should be like screaming from the rooftops how happy he is. But because of that number, the number will trump everything in his mind
yeah.
because we're just so fundamentally, and this is where you get into the corruption of, Philip Morris and cigarette companies in the 1980s buying 80% of the food companies and then making hyper palatable, ultra processed junk and convincing everyone to focus on calories, not on nutrients. It
Yes.
just became this game of how much do you weigh is the marker of health. And people get so stuck on that. It's really sad.
Yeah. Well, and to have those conversations with people, particularly, I work with a lot of women, so is the number going to get you? What do you really want? Well, I'm going
Right.
to look like I work out. Oh, you do?
Mhm.
Okay. So the scale has no bearing on that. And I talk about it. There was one year, I don't remember what year it was, 21, maybe 22, maybe 2021, where the CrossFit Games was on. And I
Mhm.
used to love CrossFit. Not that I do that because it's very hard on my thyroid. Can't do that.
Yeah.
Um, but what was great about the games this one year in particular is in the corner when they would be showing the women competing, they would have their name and whatever, and they would put their height and their weight.
Hmm.
And they don't do it anymore. I think it was only that one year. And I was like, holy, like, dang, look at that. Like that girl is thick. Like she's super strong and she looks amazing. And she's 5'4" and she weighs 165 pounds. Holy crap.
Yep.
Right. To say you want to look a certain way, you want to feel a certain way. Well, let's focus on how you look and how you feel. Let's not focus on that number doesn't do that for us.
Yeah.
And you have to stop looking at that if you want to actually make progress. And I talk all the time about like, how many marathoners do you hear every year? Not as many, but there are that like cross the finish line and drop dead. Well, they're
Yeah.
really skinny. They're
Right.
really skinny, but are they
Yeah.
healthy? Let's think about the difference. There's a huge difference.
Yeah.
Not for everyone. I mean, because you don't want to be 100 pounds overweight and have a lot of fat on you. I call that extra energy on your
Mhm.
body, right?
Yeah.
But like you said, there's a difference. You can, and people now are so attached to that calories in, calories out. What does the scale say? Those online calculators. They're like,
Hmm.
hi, what's your weight? Here's what you should. It's like, oh my God, like you said, that doesn't account for I have more muscle mass. I need to be eating
For
more,
sure.
etc.
Yep. I use that example all the time because my BMR calculated is in the high 1600s
Yeah.
and mine tested with a mask on my face in an actual laboratory is 1975 calories. If
Sure.
I do nothing, I'm 5'9". Like
Mhm.
what? It's mental, right? If I were to follow those calculators and do calorie math, like I'd be in big trouble. But
Well,
the other, sorry, go ahead.
you bring up a good point though about that really briefly is use and BMR. That's
Mhm.
absolutely doing nothing.
Exactly. Yes.
How many people do absolutely nothing?
None.
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 Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And how many people are like, oh my gosh, and you're gonna hear it this weekend because it's Valentine's Day, right? Are you gonna earn your food now? Let's earn our food,
Right.
right? How many
Yeah.
calories is that one piece of chocolate? What do you have to do? You have to do 20 burpees for that one piece of chocolate, right?
Right. Right. It's crazy.
It's
And this is
more
the thing
about
too. Like More about what?
No, go ahead.
I was just going to talk about like one piece that you touched on that I think is really important, where you were asking like you want to lose a specific amount of weight. What are you trying to feel, right? This is what I ultimately come back to is if you look at the number one human incentive, period, across the board, it is one thing. You want more love,
Yes.
period. The six pack influencer wants more love. The marketing guru on social media who's always flexing his Rolex and his Lambo, he wants more love. You need to lose 100 pounds because you're considered clinically obese. You want more love, period. When you can understand that, everything changes because it's not only that you want more love from other, you are desperately seeking more love from self. And
Yes.
virtually every health and wellness program, I mean, the best example of this is New Year's resolutions.
Oh, I hate them.
I know, and people don't realize that they are one of the biggest mirrors for society of self-loathing, low self-worth, self-sabotage. Like you are setting yourself up for failure so that you can validate the story that you have that you suck. And so you can validate the story. My least favorite false belief that everyone holds is that getting healthy sucks,
I know. It
right?
doesn't.
No, it doesn't. And that's the thing. And if you can get rid of the short-term mindset like we talked about, and you can go into these things honestly, doing things like daily mirror work, standing in a mirror saying I love myself. We do the daily mirror work, that's the I love yous. We also do I'm proud of you for, I forgive you for, and I commit to you that. And there's 5 statements each. So
Wow.
I tell people if you're willing to meet yourself where you are and have the self awareness to say, okay, the last 30 years, not so great. I have to get out of this short term mindset if I want my next 30 years to be even better. And the fastest way, in my coaching experience, for people to kind of fill their meter of self love and self worth is to simply learn to keep commitments to themselves.
Thank you.
That's it, right? But in order to do that, you have to be honest and meet yourself where you are.
Mhm.
Because if you've been overweight for 30 years and sedentary and you decide this January is the January where I start going to the gym 5 days a week, I'm going to do resistance training plus cardio, I'm going to eat 1,200 calories a day, and it's going to be amazing. And then 3 weeks in, you hate your life, you give up, you spiral, you tell a story that you suck and you've always sucked and you're always going to suck, and getting healthy sucks, right? So this is an act of very low self-worth, very low self-love.
Mhm.
Whereas if this person was self-aware and very honest, they might say, okay, if I love myself, then I need to be able to keep commitments to myself, which means I need to set realistic commitments to self. So this may be that you look in the mirror and you say, I commit to you that every morning for the next 3 mornings, I'm going to start my day with a glass of filtered water.
Mhm.
Done. That's the commitment. That's it. That now you may be saying, "Oh, that can't possibly be meaningful enough. I need to get to the gym and
Oh,
I need to do this and I need to do that." And I'm like, "No, pay attention." Because on day 3, when you drink that glass of water, you get to put your arms in the air and have a little celebration. Say, "I did it. Holy crap, I did it."
yeah.
I commit to myself that every day for the next 7 days, I'm going to have that same glass of water. And then the momentum builds and the momentum builds. And before you know it, a year later, you're keeping massive commitments to yourself. You're setting bigger goals. You're doing better things in your career and your business, and you're being a better partner and you're living a healthier lifestyle, all these different things. But you have to be willing to meet yourself where you are, meet yourself where you are.
Yeah. And I love that you brought that up because um we always and I always try to take things. We have all these separate beliefs and cliches and things that we use in different areas of our life. And people always say things like this. It's the little things that matter. It's the
Hmm.
little things that matter. But when you talk about, hey, when you look in the mirror and say, I commit to you that I will drink a glass of water every morning, and someone says, well, that can't be good enough. It's like, it's the little things. They
Exactly.
build on themselves. It's how you build a house,
Yep.
one at a time. And if you do that, then all of a sudden, like you're saying, a year from now, you're a different person. You're a totally different person a year from now. Keeping
Hmm.
the stuff, but right, you've changed, you've recreated yourself one small little thing at a time. And people forget about that. Like you said, New Year's, like let's do everything. That's why 2 weeks after it's called Quitter's Day. It's a Friday. 2 weeks
Yeah.
after New Year's Day, Thursday. Like stop doing that. And I think that's honestly, that's where we come in as coaches is to have the knowledge and understanding of working with all these people and saying, that never works.
Right.
That never works. And I'm going to stand here in front of you and be your mirror
Hmm.
and help you to do that and make those promises to yourself and keep them.
Hmm.
And while you're working on that, I'm going to be walking right beside you because I still have things like my training this morning. I texted my coach in the middle of my thing and I'm like, oh my God, my session is terrible today. Just
Hmm.
can't get the weights up, nothing. And he texted me back and he said, and I said, by the way, I said, it's not my hormones either because I don't have those anymore. I supplement with those. But he texted back and he said, I'm pretty sure it's between your ears. When you get home, journal. That's a coach.
Yeah,
That's a coach.
totally. Yep.
Absolutely. And that's what we have to work on and I think that's the beautiful part about being coaches is that, like you said, we can meet people where they're at.
Yep.
And we understand that the physical things we ask you to do, those actions, bang, 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 those
Hmm.
actions are rooted in the feelings that you have about yourself.
Yeah.
So while we're working on the actions, in a roundabout way, we're going to be back here talking about your feelings and having you work on your feelings too, and how you look at yourself and feel about yourself.
100%. A
And
hundred percent.
how many people back out on promises to others versus themselves?
I mean, just in general, you mean in society or clients
Really,
or?
think about it. How many would do that? How many people back out of promises to other people?
Oh yeah. I mean, I talk about this all the time, right?
Yeah.
Because you said you work with mostly women. Me too. 85% of my clientele is women, mostly moms.
Mm-hmm.
So I use the
Oh,
example. I'm like, listen, if you told your 5-year-old that at 3 p.m. at the end of soccer practice, you will be there to pick them up, do you just not go? You just don't show up?
right. Figure out your own way home
Exactly. Why would you do that, right?
for it, right? And then blame them for it.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
100%,
Mm-hmm.
right? So this is, I love that you use the analogy of the mirror, right? Because it's the same thing. I think any good coach is just holding up a mirror and just letting people come to their own realizations on their own by having their own choices and actions reflected back to them, right? So I swear I'm going to do a YouTube video about this at some point, but I talk about this term that I use, mommy martyrdom.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to help these moms see because there's so many objections around time. I don't have time to be healthy. It's like I'm driving the kids to soccer practice and I've got the PTA and then I have the church meeting on Sunday and then I gotta make dinner for everybody and I this and I that. And they tell this story of selflessness that is mommy martyrdom.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of a gut punch for them when I explain to them that that's very selfish behavior. And they're like, wait, what? And then I just go to the airplane. You're on an airplane and they say, put your oxygen mask on first, right? If you know, okay, I could look like a hero to my kids because I'm going to put their oxygen mask on first, but then you know you're going to pass out and you can't help anybody else. Was that a selfless act or was it a selfish act?
Mm-hmm.
And most of these moms, when I start to ask them what's going on in their romantic relationship, how is parenting, how's their relationship with their kids, there's usually an awful lot of conflict in that household. There
Mm-hmm.
is snappiness, there's resentments, there's all these different things. And I'm like, you're telling a story that you're being selfless by putting everyone else's needs before your own. You eat the most convenient junk food because you just don't have time. You don't have time to go to the gym. You don't have time for self care. You don't have time for journaling, meditation, none of the things. Everyone else comes first. But then you tell me that every day in your household, there are fights. You're snapping at your children, you're punishing your children, you and your partner are getting into it, your sex life isn't what you want it to be, blah, 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 blah. Does it sound like the choices you're making are creating the best partner and the best mom for the people that you love more than anything else in the world?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that if you prioritized yourself, put your oxygen mask on first, and the next thing you know, mom is not resentfully making lunches and throwing them at the kids and shuffling them out the door, but she's actually showing up with love?
Mm-hmm.
Which one seems more selfish and which one seems more selfless? And just rewriting these stories. And I always tell people, like, we're not here to judge. That's like this, the low self-worth, the low self-love is like we're looking at the data and we're saying, oh my God, what a terrible mom and partner I am. No, not at all. We have to be willing to analyze the data and say this belief that you have is creating this current reality. Is that the reality that you want? If the answer is no, then we have to objectively look at the choices that are being made and just say, what happens if, for a little while, we make the opposite choice? And then we just see what happens. If life improves, great. If it doesn't, let's reassess.
Yeah. And at the same time, like you said, judgment-free zone
Mhm.
is honoring the fact that they didn't come to these beliefs as a mother, as a parent on their own.
Right.
You learned that from somewhere.
Hmm.
You learned to be that person from someone, some
Yeah.
people, right? So let's extrapolate that out to the present. You
Hmm.
now have children. You're showing those children how to be adults and how
Hmm.
to interact in relationships. And you're showing them what a relationship should look
Hmm.
like based on what you're doing. And is that what you want them to feel when they're in a relationship or when they have children or what their daily lives are going to feel like? Because,
Hmm.
and I say this so often, particularly coming from education, is like they don't listen to what you say, they watch what you do.
Yeah.
They do what you do, they don't do what you say. And parents are like, yeah, they never listen to me. I'm like, but they watch you and they
Yes.
know. And that is what they take into their heart and they take that into their soul. And that's what comes with us into adulthood. Those are
Hmm.
the things that we have to uncover and go, is this working for me now? Why am I
Yeah.
that's where the reconnection comes back in, is to find all those spaces in us and say, is that working for me? I don't think that works for me. So how am I going to do that different?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's an amazing. Are you familiar with Peter Crone?
I don't think so.
Amazing coach online, and he had. It's so funny because it's nearly identical to what you said, which is I love that you came to that conclusion on your own and said it that way. But he has this line where he says, "Your children will do a terrible job listening to you, and they will do an amazing job becoming you."
Oh yeah.
And that's really what's happening there.
And you
With your
hear it in adults all the time. Do you not hear this in adults all the time? Oh my God, I sound just like my mom. Oh,
yeah.
I did just like my dad.
Yeah.
People do it all the time.
Yeah, yeah, totally. It's like you're setting the standard for health. This is what health and wellness looks like. This is what romantic relationships look like. This is what your beliefs around money look like. All these different things, right? For instance, I had a client say this to me once on a private call, and then we had to untangle it. Like, I'll give you an example, right? I'm a business owner. So I own two supplement companies. I own my high ticket coaching business, I guess you would call it. And then I own a drop shipping store. And I used to own an Airbnb. I had all these different things that were running all at the same time. And I'm very, very busy. I had a lot of things going on. So I have a house manager. This house manager takes care of all the things in my house and also meal preps for me and knows my macros, right?
God, you need
I've
one of those.
yeah, so I've set myself up in a way where I have that thing, right? Which by the it's far less expensive than people think it is. But I was talking to a private client that I had, and I talked to her about where can we save you some time? Because it's just this objection of I don't have the time, I don't have the time, I don't have the time. This particular woman was a stay-at-home mom, and she had several children, and she's cleaning the house and all these things. Her husband, who was like the breadwinner in this situation, um, absolutely loved her, adored her, supported her, wanted her to have the support she needed, was making multiple six figures per year. And I suggested she hire a house cleaner, even twice a month. What if you just got a house cleaner? She immediately looks at the screen. She goes, "Oh my God, my mother would disown me." There it is.
Bang. Yeah.
Bang. Hit the
Oh,
nail on the head. She couldn't
yep.
even, it just fell out of her mouth.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Which is
okay, well, now we
obviously,
need to dig into this.
that's the honest to God truth is where she lived. That's where she lives.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just thinking about it all the time. What kind of mother would I be if I
Mm,
did not keep my own house?
right. Probably a happier one.
A much happier one for sure. It's like, I mean, I haven't cleaned my own house in probably 10 years. I don't know, even I was a musician prior to doing this. I had a 15-year music career. I was never cleaning my own house. I wasn't going to do it. Even before I could probably afford it, I wasn't cleaning my own house. You know what I
Okay.
mean?
You just dropped that on us. Hang on. We have to rewind because I know everyone that's going to watch this is like, wait a minute. He was a musician. What genre? What type of musician were you?
Pop music. I play piano and sing.
Did you really?
Yeah,
Would
yeah.
we have heard you anywhere?
Yeah, maybe possibly. I never had, I would say, radio hits, but I had a reality TV show on ABC when I was 25 called The
Shut.
Big Time. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I did over 300 shows a year for the last 10 years of my career. I was in downtown Nashville for 10 years of that, and my music is in TV shows and movies, and yeah, it was a wild journey.
You.
Yeah.
And now you're just helping people be better people. With
Yeah,
that.
well, and that's the thing, right? Is like you were talking about when you share your stories with disordered eating. With me, I was a fat kid growing up. I went into high school almost 200 pounds at 5'2", and I grew up watching Arnold Schwarzenegger. So that was a perfect recipe for body dysmorphia.
Oh
So at
yeah.
15 years old, I started lifting weights 2 hours a day. Muscle and Fitness magazine became my Bible. And then you take that insecure little kid with body dysmorphia and you put him on stage. I started playing professionally at 17 years old. And
You
then,
do that.
yeah, I played a talent show in my hometown for about 700 people, and it got put on the news. And then all of a sudden, like overnight, I was a small town celebrity.
What
It
did
was
that do though for like, did you have a ton of anxiety or how did that work for you?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like you said, do you think people are aware that they're dealing with low self-worth, low self-love, or living a life that they don't want to live? And I think the answer consciously is no. And at that time, I look back now, right? The last 12 years of my journey, I'm 38 years old now. The last 12 years of my journey has been nothing but a self-love journey. And it has been the hardest thing I have ever done. So I can look back now and I can remember every single show I played. I was terrified. I was always scared, no matter what. And I did not show that. I was very confident, right? So nobody would have known that I had these insecurities that I had, but they followed me everywhere. And then, going from a very small town, moving out to Nashville, I got a degree in songwriting from Berklee College of Music. And then I moved down to Nashville. I started doing licensing stuff, TV, movie, that kind of thing. Then I started performing 300 shows a year. So it's like I'm performing until 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm going to sleep and then I wake up and I'm punishing my body until I throw up. Like
No.
I was a boxer, I'm a purple belt in jujitsu. I was doing CrossFit twice a days. I got certified by the founders of Strong First Kettlebells.
Nice.
I've done weapons training, martial arts training, everything you can imagine. Like I was 160 pounds, I was deadlifting 425. Like
Jeez.
all of the hard things that people do, I've done them. So
Mhm.
when I talk about this journey of self-love, it's because I had to do it for myself. I had to figure that out for myself, you know?
Do you feel like you chose those oh my gosh, I have a friend who did the strong fit and I was like, oh my God,
Yeah.
kettlebell. Um, do you feel like looking back on it, you chose those things as physical goals to in some way punish yourself?
Yes, for sure. Yeah.
I see a lot of people, and I'm one of them. I did the same thing. I used to, I was fat until I became anorexic. I went like totally the other way. Um,
Yeah.
but same thing though. I would punish myself with exercise,
Hmm.
and I did, oh shoot, I did 6 marathons and 12 half marathons and a decade of CrossFit and like all those things. And
Hmm.
did, and I got a lot of good attention for
Of
doing that.
course. Yeah.
That became my identity. This is
Hmm.
who I am. So you talk about moms, right? Who
Hmm.
that's their identity. They have to be the best mom. Well, all of a sudden, and it's not necessarily, and I don't know if this was for you, but it was for me. So comment, let me know as right. Um, I couldn't let down my identity. That was who I had to be then. All of a
Hmm.
sudden, and I didn't choose it. It just happened, and there I was. And I'm like,
Oh
okay, I'm
yeah.
just gonna keep doing this. Is that how
Yes.
it happened for you, or
100%. Yeah, that was why I started talk therapy in my late 20s, I was probably 27. And because I realized at some point, it was actually pointed out to me by an ex, that performer Justin was never turned off. There was a switch that was performer Justin. And especially when I'm doing 300 shows a year, I was on stage 4 hours a night, right? So it's like, it doesn't matter how I'm feeling that day. It's I step on stage, what's up, Nashville? Woo, here we go, right? It's like no matter what.
right?
So it's like a constant suppression of whatever my emotional state actually is, not feeling any of that stuff. And then by the end of my career, I was drunk 6 nights a week. I was always drunk on stage because that's just like, this is what rock stars do, right? And it was so widely accepted. So I was constantly repressing my actual emotional state to the point where the self-punishment, all those things, it all came back to this idea of just this kind of, again, when we switch back to what we talked about earlier, people living a life that wasn't really designed for them,
Sure.
right? So I had to always put on this kind of avatar costume and like here I am in the world and here's Justin. My romantic relationships, like all the girlfriends I ever had, saw me from the crowd and then came and talked to me when I was done playing. So they already have their projections of who I am, and I have to live up to this rock star status. So what ended up happening was I was getting a ton of love, quote unquote, right? It's like people want to take pictures with me and I'm literally signing autographs and these kinds of things. But all the compliments that I'm getting aren't landing at all because
Sure.
I'm playing a character.
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
it's like whoever authentic, genuine Justin is behind the scenes somewhere over here, nobody knows what that guy is. And as long as I continue to behave in this way, I'll get all the love I could possibly want.
Did
But
you
none
ever
of
feel
it is
like a fraud?
landing.
Did you ever feel like if they really knew who I was, they wouldn't be giving me all this attention?
To be honest, at the time, I could only answer that question in hindsight because I didn't know. I literally didn't know who I was. When I got to my first day of talk therapy, she's like, "Why are you here?" I was like, "To be honest, I don't know. Somebody suggested this to me, but like my life is dope. I'm on stage all the time. People love me. I'm super close to my family. My
Everything
childhood was
else.
awesome. Everything was great, right?" And then now, I mean, once you finally tease it apart, it was like I had so much trauma and so many like very very bad things that happened to me and a lot of crazy shit that went down when I was in my teenage years. But it's at the time, it's just here I am. I'm the happy performer. I'm charismatic. Everything is great. So
Hmm.
like I didn't even know that there was a side of me that wasn't this. You know what
Sure.
I mean? I
Yeah. Yeah.
couldn't put those pieces together at the time.
Yeah. Wow. So you have a really interesting journey then in
Hmm.
terms of the psychological as well as the physiological, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Well, I mean, it gets crazier because around that same time that I started therapy, I found the paleo diet. And
Oh,
when I found the paleo diet, I started dropping body fat very quickly.
yeah.
And I was like, wait a second, this is a cheat code. Where has this been? I'm like killing myself CrossFit two-a-days over here. This
Yeah.
is crazy. And around that same time, my niece was born terminally disabled. So
Mm,
she was having over 300 seizures a day. And within the first 7 days of life, she was put in the pediatric ICU. They had to drill a hole in her stomach. She couldn't eat or drink. They started feeding her through what's called the G tube in her belly.
yep.
And this was really the turning point for me because what they do with children and infants in that setting is if they believe it's epilepsy, which they didn't know what Savannah had, her name's Savannah, but they were like maybe it's epilepsy, and they put these kids on a ketogenic diet.
Yeah. Oh,
So
yeah.
ketogenic diet in the medical setting to suppress seizures. So that I was like, wait a second. I knew that nutrition was powerful because I just learned about this paleo stuff.
Hmm.
Now you're telling me that if we remove these refined processed carbohydrates, we can like literally suppress seizures.
Yep.
That was my first introduction to keto. So I started doing keto myself. And then I found out that the way they do the ketogenic diet for infants with a feeding tube is baby formula. And there's a baby formula called Keto Cal, and
Mm,
Keto Cal is made by Gerber, it's owned by Nestle, and our tax dollars subsidize it in these pediatric ICUs. So I knew just enough to be annoying to doctors at that point,
sure.
and I checked the ingredients on this stuff. It's high fat, low carb for sure. Hooray, it's keto, fantastic. But it's mainstream medicine not paying attention to quality. And all of those fats were hydrogenated vegetable oils.
Yeah.
And then it's artificial flavors and sweeteners, which doesn't make sense because it's going into a G tube. It's not touching taste buds. And
Right.
then synthetic versions of vitamins. They're going to use folic acid. They're not going to use methyl tetrahydrofolate or something like that, right?
Mhm.
So I pointed that out to a world-renowned neurologist, and he looks at the bottle and he looks at me and he goes, "Huh, I never thought to check that."
Isn't that terrible? Oh,
And I could see it in his face. And I'm like, listen, so many people think that I'm anti-doctor because I've like ranted about it so much, but I was like, I could see it in this guy's face. He was devastated. I'm like,
mhm.
he's actually trying to help us. He cares that my family is having this situation. He cares that there's a dying baby in front of him.
Yeah.
And it never occurred to him to check this thing because he's just doing standard of care.
Right. Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
that changed everything for me. I actually made a baby formula in my kitchen out of paleo superfoods using food dehydrators and processors. I got it cleared by the neurologist to feed it to Savannah. That became my first superfood powder that I sold to CrossFitters online. And then I just started going Facebook Live and telling people what I was exploring. I read a book called Medical Nemesis that was talking about like the truth of mainstream medicine. Then I started buying biochemistry and biology textbooks that were referred to me by Rob Wolf, who's amazing. He was like such a big part of my journey.
Yeah.
So I just started studying human metabolism, and that was, Savannah's 10 years old now, and that's kind of
Wow.
where all this came out of.
Yeah. Yeah. It goes back to what you said earlier was, and I say this to people all the time. It's like our society is underfed, or how do I say this? Sorry. Overfed and
Mhm.
undernourished.
Yes.
And they go, what? And I go, think about it. We're overfed. We have a lot of food, a lot
Hmm.
of quote, air quote, food, right? But we're very undernourished, meaning we're eating a lot of quote food, but it's not giving us what we need. We're not getting our vitamins, we're not getting our nutrients. Our body can't use that. And that's why you can go to McDonald's and have your 2,000 calorie meal, and 3 hours later your body's like, give me more, because
Yep.
it didn't get anything it needed at all.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's yeah, that's you have a fascinating story.
Yeah, it was crazy, and it's it's been a wild ride, and that's just that like I think that part of the reason why I'm able to do what I do is because I didn't come up in like mainstream academia or go to medical school or something like that, where I'm able to just kind of take a step back and like I said, like that doctor absolutely wanted to help us. He was a really nice guy. He was with my family every day for like months,
Yeah.
and it's just he just like he had the blinders on and this is what he was told to do and this is how he handles the situation. There wasn't a lot of like complex thinking going on there.
Yeah. Right. And I mean, we've both of us have talked to enough doctors, nurses, those types of people. They they do what they have to do. You get what, 10 minutes with your doctor if you're lucky. I always tell
Totally.
people, I like you. I don't have anything against doctors. If I'm broken or bleeding, I'm going there.
Yeah.
That's great. But I'm doing everything I can, and I'm educating myself to make it so I don't have to go there.
Hmm.
So I'm yeah, eat the real food, do the appropriate amount of movement, you know,
Yes.
take supplements that are necessary, don't over supplement. And if you can get it from food, do it that way. Get your sleep. Like, and it's funny because you've talked about sunlight a lot, and
Hmm.
like you've woven it into the conversation, but never directly. But that sun
Yeah.
is so important. So
I'm
important.
obsessed with it. I'm
Side.
obsessed. Yeah, with this whole new field now, quantum biology is like unbelievable. It's so fascinating. And that has been an absolute game changer for me. I think it's a game changer for everybody. But again, it's like you look at the mainstream, it's like stay out of the sun at all costs or you will get skin cancer.
Skin
It's like it's
cancer.
insane. It's so crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, we have to have that there's, those big pieces that you talked about. You have to be able to connect back with yourself. There's that
Mhm.
self-love piece that you have to absolutely work on. And it's not just work on it for 5 years or 10 years. Like that is a constant. Like this is the only true relationship you have is with
Yeah.
yourself, right?
Yeah.
Like there is no relationship outside of this one if you don't have this one, period.
Right.
Right.
Correct.
So you have to do that. And then in addition to that, you have to look at the things that you're doing, the actions that you're taking, those choices that you're making.
Hmm.
And you have to also be really aware of everything that you're ingesting that's not food, right?
Yes.
What are you reading? What are you hearing from people? And take that learner mentality and ask the good questions about what you're seeing and what you're hearing. Those are so important.
Yeah, 100%. It's holistic, right? The term that I use with my private clients is how you do something is how you do everything.
It's true.
And every single aspect of your life plays into other aspects of your life. If your health and wellness is suffering, your relationships will suffer. If your
Mm,
relationships are suffering, your finances will suffer. If your finances are suffering, it's everything. It's all tied together. It's a complex web, and you can't look at it as one isolated piece.
mhm. And it's so much easier if you just look at one isolated piece.
I know. Yeah. Yeah. But
Unfortunately,
again, easier in the short term,
easier in
much
the short
harder in
term.
the long term.
As long as we think short term, everything is
That's it.
everything is easier. Hey,
Yeah.
Justin, if there was one thing you wanted to leave the listeners with,
Mhm.
one or something that we haven't talked about or anything, what would you want to kind of wrap this up in a bow with?
Yeah, I would say the moment you can shift the lens from when it comes to something like food versus poison, right? If you're trying to change your dietary choices, just look at it as you have so much self respect and so much self love that you now have standards for yourself.
Mm,
Don't look at it as a diet. Don't look at it as a protocol. Look at it as standards, right? If I love myself, I would never knowingly put poison into my face.
mhm.
Not going to do it. So just choose your standards and live by them. And the moment you start showing up for yourself and meeting your own standards, watch that like magic, all the other people in your life start meeting your standards as well. And everything gets better.
Everything. That is fantastic. Hey, Justin, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate all the time. We could talk for days. I literally
For
could talk for
sure.
days. That would be fantastic. Hopefully we'll have you on again to talk on other topics as well, or even just expand on what we talked about today. And in the show notes, I will link all the ways people can find you. But before we go, tell people so they hear it and then they can read it later.
Perfect. Yeah, I say the number one place to go is probably Instagram. My social handle is the same everywhere. It's at Justin Nault Official. And if you go to Instagram and you click the message button, just say, "Hey, I heard you on a podcast. Can you send me your foods list?" Right? Like I have a foods list. It's 110 foods to choose from that will heal your metabolism. I'll send it to you for free. If you want the daily mirror work, I'll send you that for free. Like whatever you need, just let me know and we'll chat.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you so much, Justin.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.